QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021 Balance Sheet Vertical Analysis. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars practice file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown, selecting the open windows list. We're now going to be creating a vertical analysis balance sheet, and we'll talk about what the use of that could be. It's a very common report, very useful report. I'm going to start off doing this with a summary balance sheet because I think when we deal with percentages, sometimes they can be a little confusing. So we'll start with a summary balance sheet here first. I'm going to go to the reports dropdown. We're going to go to the company and financial. Instead of the standard balance sheet down here, let's go to the summary balance sheet, which will have a few less numbers in it. So there we have that. I'm going to change the date to 02/28/21, so the end of February. So here's our nice, neat balance sheet. Now, this, of course, gives us our dollar amounts. If I was to compare it to, say, another company and possibly comparing it to a company that is larger than us because we're trying to benchmark to them, then we might not be able to compare our dollar amounts as easily, but we might be able to compare percentages as we can when we're comparing performance and jobs and whatnot for someone who's working or something like that. Someone, for example, if we're trying to see who's doing a better job as a baseball player, we're going to have to use some kind of percentages ratio analysis. And same thing will be if we're comparing ourselves to another company, we have to compare the relative amounts in certain cases to see how we're doing, given the fact that we're starting from different starting points in terms of dollar amounts in total. So what we'll do then, we'll go to the customized reports up top. And I'm just going to click this item off that says percentage of columns, and that's it. There we have it. Now we have our percentages on the right-hand side. I'm going to do our other customization, just removing the pennies here and removing the items to the left, making negative numbers bracketed, so that might clean it up a little bit further. So I'm going to customize the reports. I'm going to go to the header and footer. I'm going to remove the date, time, and report bases. Then I'm going to go to the fonts and numbers. I'm going to make the negative numbers parentheses red, and I'm going to remove the pennies and say OK. So that might clean it up a little bit more. So now what do these percentages mean? This is a common way to see a report. Now, if I was comparing to another company, I can't really compare how much money we have, how much dollars we have in the checking account compared to a larger company because they will presumably have more money in the account than we do. But we can say, hey, how are we in comparison to our total assets? So I could say, let's compare the percentage, which is 108,505 divided by the total assets, which is going to be this 227,315. And I can say we have about 48% of our assets in cash. We can then say, is that equivalent to what someone else is doing? You can kind of see this with finance. Oftentimes when we look at, portfolios, you might say how much of our assets are in stocks and equity versus someone who's a really good portfolio manager or something, and try to line up our investment portfolio. Similar kind of thing with a business. With a business, our objective is different, not to earn revenue through dividends and income, but rather earn revenue through the function of our business, in this case, retailer of guitars. So we might want to compare ourselves to the best around, the biggest retailer of guitars, who probably make more money than we do, and we can compare to them by basically doing this ratio analysis and saying, okay, do we have a relative amount of cash to them? How much is our accounts receivable compared to our total assets? Are we collecting on the receivables? 14172 divided by the 227,315. We could say, okay, that's about 6% of our receivables there. Other assets. And then a big one, of course, is how much we're investing in fixed assets in many industries. What is that compared to our total assets, And we could say, okay, that's going to be the 93028 divided by the 227,315. And so that's going to be 41% of our assets are in the fixed assets. And obviously, we could do the same for the liability side of things. We can be comparing, and in total, we can compare, of course, the total. We can say what are total liabilities compared to total equity and liabilities, so we can say what is the 78843 total liabilities, the amount that's owed to a third party, compared to total liabilities and equity, which is the same as assets, divided by the 227,315, and that gives us that 35% about. And so you can see how this kind of a ratio analysis is a starting point, to really a good starting point for us to do a comparison and benchmarking to other companies, and it kind of launches you into this ratio analysis type of world to try to to try to measure how well you're doing in comparison to other companies that are having different starting points, just as we would try to measure someone like a baseball player on how well they're doing as far as their hitting or getting on base percentages when they've had different numbers of at-bats over time, and this kind of thing that we would do, which we would do for any job, not just baseball players. Any job has similar kind of problems when we're trying to compare how one person is doing versus another person, and we have to do some kind of ratio analysis to do so. Now, obviously, we can do the same kind of thing with the standard balance sheet. If we went to the reports drop down, company and financial, and we went down to the balance sheet standard report, changing the date up top to 02/28/21. It looks a little bit more intimidating of a report, but we get more detail in a report such as this. We can go to the customized reports, just check off that one item, percentage of the columns. I'll do our other changes too, header and footer, removing the date, time, and report basis. And then on the fonts and numbers, I'm going to make the negative numbers parenthesized and red, and then remove the pennies and OK. So there we have it. Now we got a bit more detail in terms of our accounts. Once again, everything is comparing to like the bottom line of that category, all assets then compared to total assets. Therefore, if we add up all the percentages, it'll add up to 100% because total assets over total assets, or 227,315 divided by 227,315 will be 100%. All liabilities and equity then being compared to total liabilities and equity, which is of course the same thing as total assets, because assets equal liabilities plus equity. Therefore, if you add up all the percentages in this column, they will once again add up to that 100%. So this kind of ratio analysis can be quite useful.